I feel like, wow, like there is some natural kind of coordination that's happening between groups. For example, the curation thing. Um, that's one that is definitely like deeply involving comms and deeply involving Sampo. And now with Irem working on Communitas, it's deeply involving Communitas. So and there's all these interdependencies, and the only way that this thing is going to work is if we get the whole community like swarming around this over this next month. So that would be like an example of something that like Nate was talking about this like a month ago or so, and actually I've seen you kind of like continue to talk about Nate, but it's like, oh, if we were going to swarm, like around like one epic issue, what would it be? So I just, humbly would throw out like, and maybe there's something else too, right? But like, if there are one or two things that's like, who, what could we really all like be rowing together on over this next month? Is there something like that? That's my question, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do this or not.
I think it's a great time to do it. I think a lot of the people on this call would have good feedback on that. So I would answer last and see what other people think. Maybe Nate, you can go first. Oh, Zeb, I saw you jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say like, yeah, for this sprint planning, I was like, okay, I know the things we like. I actually was very aligned with what Gideon was saying. Like the sprint, like where I just opened like my board and I'm closing issues basically. And yeah, the idea, I'm really like, I really think like we should like, get that board coordination and then speak like, what we need like because actually right now for transparency, I don't know what we're missing right now. I know like Paul from One Hive, they want to do param parties for conviction voting. They feel like it's so easy for them like to pass proposal and waste money. Like yeah, kind of like the TEC, but in One Hive it's even easier. And then yeah, they want to do some param parties, and so that's something like I'll focus on in that done. But other than that, like I'm like, yeah, actually, I mean, I didn't announce it in the community, but I feel like doing the audits like every 6 months, like every 3 months is so in a row, and it takes so much time and so much effort. So I mean, that's another thing I wanted to say at some point. But I just wanted to say really aligned with what Gideon was saying, and then it's like, let's say, like, okay, transparency. What do we need? And then we need this, and this would be great. Like Nate sometimes is sending good ideas, but like we need to get organization and structure and then push them. So yeah, I wanted to say like I'm very aligned with what you did to say.
Yeah, I like that a lot too. Maybe we could use this space to bring the issues of the retro board to address. Like, how can we coordinate to make them happen?
Yeah, so I think it works better in terms of our current organization where we have people. I think it would work really well that each maybe even each working group submits a major initiative for the upcoming sprint, and we have we take the 10 minutes before each sprint planning to say, hey, what are our priorities for this month or this couple weeks, this next sprint, and we all say, okay, this is the major priority, and we organize around that priority and just execute on it and get it done. And then maybe even we can have shorter sprints if that's the case, if they're not too big of initiatives. And then so if Gideon, Sampo has a the initiative around our curation process, like let's get people using it. Like what are our goals for that curation process? Let's get it done within this next 2-week sprint and see how it goes, evaluate it from that perspective rather than and that way we can have our sprint retrospectives be more focused on the actual work that we did within that 2 weeks and not as broad and kind of I don't want to say loose, but it's kind of open to interpretation of what we were focusing on in terms of the retrospective. And so I just think that, if we can have a process of prioritization and having community input on what are the priorities for the next upcoming sprint, and we have the initiatives submitted before that sprint planning, I think it'd be a really interesting setup. That's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I just want to say that I agree with Gideon and Nate as well, and just to mention that the last sprint planning that we did, that Nate facilitated with a different format, and I think it was really good, and it's kind of like describing what he's saying right now, and I think it could really work. I think it was really objectives oriented, and people, the ones that we were in the call, we really got to participate and to do a well planning for the coming sprint. So yeah, I agree that some changes in the format would be really beneficial.
And T, do you want to share some thoughts too?
Well, I'm a bit late and I'm not entirely sure of what are we talking about, but I agree with Bear's comment on how Nate carried the last sprint planning overall.
Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead if you want to finish.
I just said back to you, so it's all good.
Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm jumping in, and I realize now that Nate and I didn't sync before this. So I was just jumping in with what we had done previously. So I propose that I pass the floor to Nate, and Nate facilitates the sprint planning. And I think that's a terrific idea, and I'll support whatever direction seems to make sense to go forward with. Does that work for you, Nate?
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I think this is one of those things where, it was an experiment last week, and with the retrospective, we didn't really get a chance to evaluate, what got done. Right now, if you could look at our sprint board, I'll actually pull that up real quick. Give me 1 second, and I will share my screen. Okay, so we had our Swarm Epic, of course. Let's see. We had a chance to hold on 1 second. We have a bunch of issues here that we decided were the priority, and let me see if I can pull up the other document. Planning ideation document. Okay. So this is what we had. Last week we had a little voting process. We created a bunch of different ideas. So we went through each one and decided which area we wanted to focus on. And so just to give everybody an idea who wasn't there, these are in bold are the ideas that we had, and we grouped them into separate ideas. So we have cultural handbook for onboarding to Web3 DAOs, education offering for the TEC, defining TEC partnerships. Another set of ideas was simplification of process, communication, and structure, reduce comms to a core team, new compensation model for contributors, focus on contributors in one working group area. This is another area. So we had basically the format was submitting ideas on what are the priorities for the sprint. And we grouped these ideas into areas of focus, and then we decided to vote on which area of focus we wanted to go on. And then we created issues around that area of focus. Now, this was not perfect in any way, but I'm always open to ideas on improving this process. And so when it comes to the sprint planning, what it ended up winning is, after we voted, was this section here, which is the simplification process, communication structure. And these are the ideas that we had for it, the issues. And then we had everybody own an issue. And so if everybody's okay with doing it through this way, we can try it again. That being said, I'm open to objections as well.
So I really like this direction. I think it's good. It's really good. And the only recommendation I would have on top of that would be, well, what you said earlier, Nate, which is, I think if we can come into the meetings with some deliberate,
Ideas.
yeah, and it's not just because I think one of the problems I've noticed that we suffer from is that we'll be in a meeting and like whatever is kind of like in top of mind or just happens to come up and it sounds kind of cool. Sometimes we kind of like all go, oh yeah, that's good, and so but that doesn't necessarily align with like the highest priorities. And so I think if there's some space like in advance of these meetings where we can like really put some thought into what are we proposing here and how does it actually align with the existing work that's already happening, I think we're going to build a lot more synergy. So like, yeah, it's just like bringing in the stuff, doing some more deliberate work in advance, tying it into the existing work, and then having that kind of the same voting process or kind of like ideate or like prioritization process in this, I think would be great.
Yeah, and in terms of, sorry for this being, I wasn't sure if we were doing this today, so if we're okay with it, we can get this started. I can share this link real quick, and we can all just edit the document together, and let's give it a shot. I mean, if everybody's okay with that.
Yeah, I just have like not for now, but I have only one concern. Like, if we focus this session just to get issues, like, do we expect like the community call be good enough to share like progress? Like we were using this call also to share like the progress of every working group, and since we are going to be focused like on what's next, I feel like I mean probably like the community call is enough. I'm just raising the concern so everyone's aware. But
yeah, ideally, I think this last swarm that we did, the sprint swarm, these issues that we had, we would have evaluated and see where we're at with these. This would have been more of a priority in focusing on. I'm not sure if everybody had a chance to update these issues and close them out or throw out notes, but the idea would be, hey, during the retrospective, we'd look at this and go, hey, what was the blockers? What was the challenging aspects of it? What do we still need to get done? And that would be part of finishing up with the following sprint, I think. And so we can incorporate that into what we're doing now. So I don't know if Bear or NT, you have any updates on these issues here, since you're here, and I have to ask Chewy later, but and Manu.
Yeah, so I do. I started doing this stakeholder TEC list of. Well, I did it. Maybe I can share it just in the chat. It's pretty rough, but I've been trying to divide it by categories like partners, projects that we have funded, organizations in the Gnosis ecosystem, active contributors like people, and I've been creating that list, and then I'm trying to create some kind of evaluation template for each of the stakeholders, so we can see like what type of partnership it is, what's the current state of that partnership, if there's any like implicit or explicit agreement with them, if there's like a financial deal with them as well, So this is still a work in progress, but that would be like the progress that I've been doing this during this time.
Is there anything that you need assistance with, or there's blockers that you need to get out of the way in order to finish it or accomplish it to where you want it to be?
I mean, I think two things. One thing would be maybe that I haven't been here like since the beginning, so maybe I might be missing some other stakeholders, some key stakeholders probably that I just don't know. So I think that would be a good idea just to share them with you, and you guys can just add whoever you think are missing. And then the other thing is that what you were saying, Nate, the other time, like what's gonna be the purpose for this, right? How are we gonna do like this type of information moving forward? I still don't have defined that pretty well, but yeah, I think I'll just finish the list first. I'll try to do the template and fill it in as well, and then probably that will be like a next step that could happen.
Yeah, and that's perfect.
I'm
Is
actually a
this
bit confused.
TEC yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Is this TEC stakeholder list different than the one Communitas use?
It is, yeah.
Why?
So the big part of this was trying to tackle a couple of issues in terms of organization within the Discord. I believe it was Bear.
In terms of the Discord, and also in terms of the state of the different partnerships that exist with for example, with the Academy, with Common Stack, with General Magic, that it wasn't really clear what was the situation there. So just kind of like trying to gather and put in one place all the relations that exist within the TEC, and just try to name them and try to look at their current state. To be honest, Livy, I didn't know there was one list in Communitas, so that's really, I think that's something that I should take a look at as well.
Yeah, the list in Communitas is somehow I don't know how we were dealing with that in terms of privacy because it has people's handles. I don't know if is that public? Is Optimus? Do you know?
It's not public.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a big part of this was we had some people who were saying, I guess, complaining that when somebody tags everyone, they did not want to be included, and so within Discord at least, to be a little bit more specific in who we can categorize when we're talking to individuals.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, that was also like the other task that I got assigned to, and this was something that I talked with Rema and Costa during the last Communitas call, and they were on it. They were already trying to clean up the roles and trying to reassign tags for different people. So that work is also getting some progress over there. I'm just gonna keep following up with them.
Okay. Well, in terms of just getting this organized, let's start with the fresh sprint. I'll keep on updating on things within this past sprint, but let's give this another try just to see if we can improve on our last ideation phase. Is everybody okay with that? I just need some confirmation here. I don't know. Okay. So let's go through it. If you guys can enter into this document, sprint planning ideation document, just listing off some priorities.
Can you post here in the chat?
Oh yeah, I can post it in the chat. Sorry. Put it in the stewards channel. And what was our sprint retrospective? Go ahead and bring that in.
It was the issue about need help rolling out TEC's first service curation.
All right.
Are those numbers on top beside this like ritualizing cultural conflicts, creation of TC narrative? Are those votes?
Yeah, those are
Those
votes.
numbers?
Those are votes.
Oh, did this happen at some point?
This happened
When?
last sprint planning, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So, do you want us to start adding stuff? So I see you're taking this stuff over from yesterday's session. Do you want us to start putting other things in below, or are we just focused on
We're just focused on the categories. So the broader ideas, the bigger initiatives, and then we'll funnel it into more detailed.
Okay, so hold off for now on the other stuff.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And so we'll kind of discuss exactly what our priorities are out of it, and then we'll identify the issues that need to be taken in order to accomplish that particular goal. So it can be anything you want. So if transparency, like if you have like a big initiative that you're thinking about that you want to get accomplished, like this is where you would propose it. This is where you'd say, hey, I wanna do this within transparency, and we say, oh, okay, that seems like a really good idea, and let's prioritize that, and then we'll go from there. Right now, we're just gathering ideas for what our priorities would be.
So do you want us to type those? I'm sorry, I'm just not following. Do you want us to type those in here, or
not the details? So if you have like an initiative,
okay.
like big one, yeah, put the big initiative, and then we'll discuss, what the priorities are, and once we figure out what our priorities are, we'll focus on how to get there, how to accomplish it.
How is this different from the actions to improve and this print retro? Couldn't we just like bring them that we already have? We did that yesterday, and then expand on them.
Yeah, we can do that for sure. I would say that, in this type of scenario, the sprint retrospective wouldn't normally have maybe the actions to improve type of approach. It would be really highly focused on the actual sprint that we just had, so it wouldn't be broad as it would be. Yeah, and so it basically brings it into the sprint planning process rather than the sprint retrospective, if that makes sense.
I don't really agree because I feel like the retrospective works so well in the model it has. Like it's a good flow for thinking, We can
And
see what we
yeah.
did better, what didn't work, and then bring actions, and it feels like everybody's in the swarm. I like this model of an ideation document, but I would love if maybe like expand on what was, it feels like double work right now. I would love if we could expand on the
Yeah.
actions that we know we have to improve and then break them down and see how we can accomplish them.
Yeah, and so I guess my point about the sprint planning and retrospective process is like our sprint retrospective is very, very broad. It doesn't focus on the actual work that we've done in the past sprint or it said we were going to do in terms of issues. It is more of kind of like a broad ideation process. And I think having more focus on the retrospective, having more focus on the actual issues that we've had within the past sprint is really something that we should kind of shift to, but that, this is all just an experiment and an idea that I'm working with right now. And so I want to hear feedback in terms of that. And in that case, like the ideation, this kind of broad ideation process would happen at the beginning of sprint planning, where we talk about the ideas, we talk about what issues need to be included in those ideas to actually execute on them. And so I'm just proposing a different structure for this in a different format, and so that's just my thoughts on it. And so yeah.
Yeah, I want to
Yeah,
second. I just want to second Nate on that. Like, I feel like in the retrospective, we don't say like new issues or anything. Like, we just say very like, oh, we should like get that, but we're not specific at all. And if we are, we need to do this and assign it to someone. Like, and this have to be done by this person or by this group of people. So we are clear on who's doing what, and it's not like we just throw it there and maybe someone does it, maybe someone. And yeah, just to be more clear, I really want to second that.
yeah, I'll add some thoughts too. The action items that we sort of bring into the beginning of each sprint, I just closed two of them, which is like an action item that we had that we voted on, but then when we go into the sprint planning and discuss who's going to take it on, it's not something that anyone takes on. So that's something that's sort of that has been happening in more than one retrospective. And then I would say two things. One, I really enjoy the idea of there being a particular focus for each sprint, and then everyone works on that one focus in their own capacity. I'd like to see how that develops. And then I just want to say one more thing. So there's a few thoughts. And then the third one is, the purpose of the retrospective is not to necessarily solve anything in particular, but to see what emerges. So it's really an introspection of it's intentionally vast. So what's working for you personally in your working group, in the community, in the world, it's intentionally meant to allow people to raise whatever is the thing that they're feeling about what went well and what went, what could have been done better, if that makes sense. And then, in doing this, I see that we have a few things. I mean, I think we should just keep going and see where we go with this, Nate. I'm on board to try this.
Okay. Yeah, I guess my only response to the it being vast, which is completely fine. I think there should definitely be a space for it. Is that we don't have space for really focusing in on evaluation of the work that has been done. And so like if Bear has issues with executing on a list, his token holder list that he's developing, let's figure out exactly what he needs to get that done. And like I feel like there's not much of a space to have that conversation, and I would think it would be part of the sprint retrospective process, but if it's not, then I feel like we should create space for that, because I think a lot of the times the issues that we have open or are still open are open because there's some type of blocker or some type of something getting in the way, and being able to have that conversation with the issue owner is very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It used to be part of the retrospective that we would close out we would look at the sprint board and then basically explain why the things that hadn't been closed weren't closed. But with so many people in 1 hour, we sort of trimmed that. And I couldn't agree more that the sort of accountability at the end of the sprint is an important part to bring back in.
Yeah. Okay. And
So
go ahead, Dina.
yeah, so here's the thing that it keeps coming up over and over, is the kind of the lack of a long-term vision. It goes by different names. Sometimes people call it a lack of an overall narrative. Sometimes it's like a long-term plan. But the thing I keep feeling in these meetings is that we have a tendency to zig this way and then zag that way based on what's happened over the last couple of weeks. And first of all, I think it's very important to be able to do that. So I think the retrospective is kind of a way to look at like, oh, what's happened? What did we, what went well, what didn't go so well, and like how do we adjust, so that the next zig or zag is more appropriate to what's happening. But the problem to me, it feels like there's no overall trajectory. And so until there's that, then what we're doing is every week we're coming in and we're going like, okay, what's important? But honestly, it feels like what we really need is some longer term planning thing that's pushing us and saying like, oh yeah, remember, don't forget, this is the thing that we're trying to do over this next 6 months is, X, Y, Z. So that's the part that really feels like we're missing right now. And it's, it's if what I'm going to be sending out that the economic development plan, whether that's it or there's something else on top of that or something, but I feel like that's if we can ground this process in that, we're going to feel so much better because it'll feel like we're making progress. We'll be able to knock off things and go like, yeah, oh, we did do that. We didn't do that. That's the tension that I'm holding right now, is that sense of like we're just going to keep going back and forth and not making big progress. That's my sense.
I agree. And this is kind of the issue that this setup here with the sprint ideation document, this is a very incomplete idea and process. And so this is something that I haven't had a lot of time to really focus on in terms of developing. I think it's in the right direction, the broad right direction, but I do think you're right, Gideon, that we need to have a higher level kind of roadmap and idea of what the commons needs, and then having the working group needs as well. And if something like the working group has something very large initiative that they need assistance with, and it's in alignment with the overall TEC roadmap as for the commons, I think that's what we can focus on. But like having better planning at the beginning and not having this ideation process so organic and so kind of, because we're going to go zig and zag and to the left field and right field and not know exactly what categorization. This is not a perfect system. I just want to make sure that is articulated right now. But this is, if we get anything out of the sprint planning process other than learning what we want to see during sprint planning, I'll be happy with that. I think that, go ahead.
Yeah, please don't take this as a criticism. I think this is absolutely the direction we need to be going. Like this feels really good, and I'm just adding like one more thing that I think will help ground it, and as we're thinking about the kind of evolving the process.
Yep, and I do think that the sprints, Sampo is going to have your own sprint planning process within Clarity. You guys are going to have your own issues that you're working on in particular, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to incorporate the entire community within that sprint process. And so I think this sprint here is something that should be held in particular as a way for the community to prioritize the direction of bigger initiatives and a way to swarm towards those initiatives when they're happening. But the method for how we do that is still not clear to me. And maybe Tam, you have some ideas of like how we improve this process, or where we go forward, or anybody else has any ideas or thoughts on it. And I think this is a good moment to actually talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, when we started talking about the transition plan and, this idea of like having a roadmap, which was difficult to do for the commons when we were so many different working groups working towards different things. I think now with this working group transition of the stewards working group transition, there being a focus on the health and long-term vision of the commons. I think what we proposed was like having quarterly OKRs. And at least that's something that is measurable, public, and everyone in any working group can participate to, any contributor can contribute to. I thought that was one way that we could address that particular challenge that we had before. Yeah, that alone. And then for this idea of the sprint planning, I'm really supporting the idea that we move away from all working groups plan in this 1-2 hour period. 100%, we need to do this. And somehow figuring out beforehand, I don't know what that structure is, but yeah, I'm feeling lower. I'm feeling something like figuring out what the priority is before we go into this.
Yep.
I don't know. The idea of like spending 20-30 minutes on ideation and then voting for there's something more around like, hey, it hits our OKRs, like maybe we prioritize the OKR, maybe we spend the time building the OKRs, prioritize the OKRs, and then slot them into each sprint. I don't know what that looks like yet, but maybe it's something more like that.
Yeah, I do think better planning before the sprint planning process would make this a lot easier to kind of evaluate and prioritize, and having those issues already articulated. And then we can create, because I do like the idea of having what we'll be working on in that sprint, and then having everybody submit ideas on what can improve, like how do we achieve that. I think that works really well. I think that's what worked really well here. We had this broad group of areas, and we said, okay, what are we doing, and how do we accomplish it? And this is what we came up with, and I think that's a really good process for it. However, getting these ideas shouldn't be so random. They shouldn't be so off the cuff. They should be very purpose driven. Yeah, and so moving forward with this, does anybody else? I just want to get the floor open real quick before we keep moving forward. Does anybody else have any thoughts? Because I think this all comes through the process of the stewards transformation process too. And so, yeah.
I'm sorry, I feel like I'm talking too much here, but Olivia and I were just going back and forth on the feedback, and I don't know. Yeah, token log might be a better, way more appropriate. I mean, Polis is definitely not the answer to everything, that's for sure. And token log would be the benefit of like having token holders weighing in. I think that one of the things I'm actually very tuned into Zepti's feedback from a month or so ago. Like, this is not a corporation, and so there's a tendency, I think, in a lot of DAOs to say, oh, we're decentralized and stuff, but in fact, actually, there's a small handful of people who are really driving it, and so that's kind of natural. There's always people who are leading and kind of putting forth ideas, but the more that we can just really regularly adopt some type of feedback process, so that before we lock in on what the OKRs are, we're always grounding it in meaningful discussion and feedback, and maybe some type of vote, I don't know, like from the community. I just think it'll be, in the long run, it may be a little bit slower, but it's kind of like go slow to go fast. At that level, like it's not like a weekly planning process, it's like quarterly. So I think we can take a little bit of time to get that feedback, but I think it'll help so much.
Yeah, I think it would be really great to have a token log process for that, actually tying up all together. So Polis had a lot of pointers for issues we need to look at from stakeholders wanting to have more information about the TEC. Maybe there's improvements in communication and I don't that we need to look in there, but there's a lot of things that we could bring on in the form of issues and then create some type of roadmap with OKRs and propose that on token log and then invite stakeholders since they are already aware that we are in this process of restructuring and the polis was this like first invitation, like first we want to hear you, now here are some solutions we are proposing. Do you agree with the direction of the solutions? Then it feels like a full loop and then we can have this process happening quarterly. So maybe in like 6 months from now or something we do the same thing again, a new polis, a sentiment analysis, new OKRs, and continue moving like that.
I like that a lot. Does anybody else have any thoughts? And don't be shy.
Hello everyone. I also think that quarterly plannings would make it like better for not spending so much time in coordination and to have like objective things to deliver and clear paths and all these tributes to what we've been talking about of making like a big TC roadmap and maybe having it. I think it's easier to have a roadmap of a year defined by quarters than divided in 2-week sprints. So I think that cadence is good, and that also I think it's interesting to talk about the working group structure evaluation and some things that we spoke yesterday about, like if a cleanup or how can we take decisions towards being more liquid. And I think that we were very much invested, all of us, in the TEC because we were hatching. But now that the commons is already upgraded, and I think we need to change the focus not so much on our inner operations, but also on how can we interact with the exterior, with the other DAOs. And I think the focus that we should have on this restructuring should be looking towards the exterior and not so much the interior.
Yeah, thanks for that, Wonka. I agree. In order to reel this in and get this sprint planning focused on a single thing, let's go ahead and take the sprint retrospective issue that we said we were going to bring into the sprint. And let's focus on this one. So it's bringing out TEC's first service curation. In order to understand what this is, I want to pass this over to Gideon real quick to just kind of explain it. And then what we'll do is start to write in tasks that need to be done in order to accomplish that. So if you could give us a little background on this, Gideon, would that be okay?
Sure, Nate. How much time? Like how many minutes? 2, 3, 4. Like how many?
I mean, take your time. Make sure everybody has a good understanding, so we can create ideas around how to accomplish it. Okay. Please, yeah. Okay.
So the background on this is in this economic development plan that I'll be sending out in like a couple days. The basic idea is that it's becoming really clear to me that the only way that we're going to be able to build the Schelling point is to have some valuable services that provide value to our stakeholders, right? That we need to actually start exactly what Juanca was saying. It's like we need to start focusing outward. We need to move our gaze outward and being really of service. And so we're looking at these, what we're tentatively calling Shelling Point services, token engineering to Shelling Point services, as a way to do that, to be able to sustain that kind of creation of value so that eventually we'll build the economy so that we can become sustainable. So that's the background on it. We were going to start with this token engineering request board. Ran into some issues, like questions from the Token Engineering Academy, so we put that on hold. And luckily, as luck would have it, Eduardo had this conversation with some folks from DAOstack, and they're like, "Hey, we've got this idea. Do you want to talk?" And we did, and it became this like perfect fill-in for the fact that we didn't have a service. And the more that we've dug into it, the more exciting it's become. So what is it? So basically the idea is to make this a kind of like a community attention concentration service, like a way of building collective attention, focusing our collective attention on various ideas that are floating around out in, mostly Twitter, but all over the place, right? How do we help the community share knowledge with each other, share information with each other in ways that advance the field of token engineering? And so it's going to start very simply as a way for people to come in to TEC's Discord server and share links. I've set up an example of this working right now in this new feature that just rolled out day before yesterday from Discord. It's called Forums. Some of you have been playing with this, but if you look over, you'll see in the community section in Discord server that there's now this section that's I think I can't remember what I called it, but I think it's like Forum. And you can easily post articles, or you can just make regular posts, and it allows you to tag it with like categories and have actual conversations that are tied to that particular post. So it's not like the regular stream of Discord. It's way better. It really looks like what you would see in a regular kind of old-fashioned forum, where you can have like really nice conversations and you can have all kinds of feedback. So that's what Discord is doing, and it just so happened, we lucked out that, that just showed up. And so what we're doing with this service is working with the Common Sense team, which is basically a combination of the folks from DAOstack and this group that's called Tangible AI. They do a lot of like chatbot development. We don't have to pay for any of the software development. They're willing to donate that in exchange for us helping them to define this service and do the community engagement work to actually get people using it. So what is it? So what this is it allows people to come into to our server, share links, or just share ideas, but we're hoping it's going to be more links, like stuff that people are getting from Twitter. And then as people interact with those posts with emojis, you'll be able to we'll be able to take that there's a Discord bot that sucks out that metadata and pulls it over into a database. That database then will be able to apply various curation rules. So to start, it's going to be very simple. It's like 5 emoji reactions or more, brings it up to the level where we want to do something with it. In the future, we'll be able to add all kinds of different rules on that, like, if somebody with this particular role, or maybe this OtterSpace badge has given an emoji response to it, then give it more juice. But to start, everybody's going to have the same amount of juice. There's a lot of stuff we got to figure out on that. Different emojis, we can take different emojis, so we could categorize things in different ways, and use that as that. The results of the curated feed. So like if you think of it like kind of the greatest hits of the TEC community, what will we do with that? Well, the first thing that we want to try to do is use this kind of collective intelligence. Like think of it like the collective intelligence of the expanded TEC community, to make our Twitter feed really interesting, right? Like we'll be using kind of the collective intelligence of the community to find really cool stuff that we can then share on Twitter. And in the sharing, we'll also be noting one, who the author of whatever it was. So let's say Zargam shares something really cool. We'll obviously, put his name on there, but we'll also note the person who shared it in our Discord server. So as a way of kind of like getting people to engage, not just with the service, but with the TEC. Then we'll start to build kind of more viral engagement. The people start to see, oh, if I participate in this, the TEC is going to be sharing my name in its circles, right? So it's a way of kind of like helping people to build their own reputation kind of on Twitter, while they serve the TEC with, finding interesting content. There are other applications down the road. One that is very possible is for the Consilience library. This is like a natural thing that we can do, because one of the other outputs of this would be an Airtable database. That will be one of the things that we will be building regardless. That's probably how the Twitter team will take the tweets out, is from this Airtable. So it's very conceivable that we could have this like a very nice display of an Airtable database that would serve as one way for the Consilience library to be able to display their curated information. But you could imagine us having like a special feed, if Libby, if you wanted to have like a feed of governance related stuff for SoftGov, you could do that too. And we can have filters on the, there's lots of different possibilities with this. In the first iteration, we're just trying to keep it really simple, but I'm super excited about this thing. This thing has a lot of potential for growth. And I think that the last thing I'll say on this is that what I really want to do is engage you all in this, because I think that once you start to dig in and see what we're doing here, you'll see like, oh, wow, I could totally see how Gravity could use something like this. Or I could, once we start to blow this out, I think that like the use cases will be very exciting, and we'll see lots and lots of stuff that the Sampo team is just not seeing by itself in working with the comms team. So, but the key to success with this, like we can build the service itself, pretty simple technologically, pretty simple. The key to success is getting not just the existing contributors within the TC, not just the hatchers, but like really getting the broader token engineering field to start using this. That will be the key for this to succeed. And also we can use this as a way to start growing the selling point of the TC, like really starting to bring people in. So that's my quick summary of it.
Thanks, Gideon. Yeah. So the way this is going to happen is underneath the TEC curation service, I have some bullet points, and perhaps you have some ideas or bullet points that you would like to add in terms of ideas surrounding how to implement this vision for the curation service that Gideon proposed. So if there's anything that I haven't put down that you think would be a good idea, even if it's just kind of broad, or maybe it's applicable only to your working group, I think this is where you put it. And then we're going to start to get more detailed on like exactly what issues we want to own and within this next sprint. So I'll give about 10 minutes for anybody, or 5 minutes for anybody to add ideas in terms of how we accomplish, or ideas for contributing towards execution of this service curation. Does that make sense to everybody? We'll take one more minute. And so I noticed people are doing the sub bullets already. So this is exactly what we want to do. This is the next part, is that we're going to look at each of these main bullet points and say, okay, if education on how to use the service, well, let's see. Well, what can we do in terms of education on how to use the service? Create infographics on how the service works for comms distribution. This would be an example of a tangible issue that we can create within our sprint planning board that can be owned by an individual. And so that's what we're going to do with the next 5 minutes, is to take each of these major bullet points and create tangible tasks that can be owned by individuals within the sprint planning process. And so that will kind of get us towards there. And Gideon, I want to take this moment to ask, is there anything that you see that is missing or would like to comment on in terms of the main bullet points?
Not off the top of my head, but actually it would be really good to put this to the team that's actually working on it, to get their take on it. But yeah, I think this is great. Like, there's already some stuff that we weren't really thinking about, so it's great. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we'll take the next 5 minutes if this makes sense. If each of these sub bullet points can be actual tasks that can be accomplished within the sprint plan, then that's the way we want to frame it. So, who wrote the post-deployment relationship? How and to which extent will the TEC be able to use the product? Anybody want to own that one? Bueller. So who wrote the "We've thought about using praise as acknowledgement"?
That was me, and Bear and I have been talking about that, and it would be great to get Livy and Mitch's take on that.
Okay, so with this type of thing, instead of, is there a way you can phrase it in terms of being an issue that can be accomplished within this sprint planning, even if it's saying going through the advice process on sprint using praise? So we want the sub bullets to be actual tasks that can be accomplished by individuals.
Is that better?
Yep, that's perfect. And so if we can take the next couple minutes, if you want to add on tasks that can be used to actually execute on these ideas, that is the next one.
Now is the time to create tasks. Is that
Yep.
what you said?
Under each of the ideas. Tam, did you write the choose the 2 to 3 strategic categories?
Yes, I did.
Sorry, could you give me a explainer on that one? Sorry.
No problem. It was what Gideon suggested earlier. For example, he said if Livia wanted to have focused on governance, so perhaps if we just choose like 2 to 3 categories that we would focus on and curate content for.
So like if it's like a governance article, then that's one of the categories that we would have focused on.
It would be many. It would say governance is the category, and we would contribute all of the governance articles that we would find,
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
or that we, think what has merit.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just noting that that also has big implications on our outreach strategy. So like, if we decided that governance was like a big focus for us, then, Livy, you could go tap the folks in Twitter who are interested in that, and then like try to like organize some folks around that. I've already there's a group of people who are really interested in kind of like organizational change, like the relationship between DAOs and token engineering and organizational change, organizational development, that kind of stuff, who are like, they can't wait for this. I just mentioned it to somebody and they're like, oh, we would love to help, populate the content on that. So, yeah.
Nice. Okay, so we have a bunch of ideas and tasks and how to accomplish those ideas. What I like to do now is to kind of pass it around and discuss a little bit about what you think the priorities are in terms of the tasks that are there in the context of your work and what you're proposing on doing. And then we will select ownership over these tasks for the next sprint. Bear, I don't know if you want to start. Would you care to? If not, I can pass it over to Gideon.
Sorry. Yeah. So I think one of the challenges I have is also kind of thinking about. So, for example, Irem and Acid Laser are already cranking, like they're moving really fast on some of the comm stuff. And Risha is working on some of this stuff too. So, how do we? This is not just about this, but like in general, going forward, when we're doing this kind of stuff, and it's like highlighting a particular team's work. How do we?
Normally this wouldn't happen. So this is something that we're doing for this particular point, and maybe we can. When it comes to task ownership, if that one of these tasks are being done by Richa or IRM or anybody else within Sampo, then we can highlight that right now. But usually this kind of conflict wouldn't happen. We'd have this submitted beforehand, and yeah.
I see. So can I so maybe one way of doing this that would really help me is if we can just go through this, and if there are folks who are like, I'm interested in this. I have something to say about this. Either like to the point where they could own it and drive it, or even if it's just like, hey, I would like to be included in the advice process for that. That would be super valuable and helpful information.
Yeah, that's what we want to do now. I just want to go through everybody and get their ideas on what tasks have been submitted and see how they feel, what their priorities are. What are the pros and cons of things? So,
got it. Okay.
Is there anything that you're excited about on this list, or that you think are really give context to development?
So priorities for me, I think there's a lot of this stuff that's already moved. The things that okay, if I were to just go through this really quickly, the things that I think could really use kind of like cross DAO attention, maybe that's how I would focus this. It would be like feedback on the functionality. For sure, really want you all to like to look at what we're proposing and like provide feedback. Same thing with the likely users. Um, I think the categories also is going to be super important. The partnerships, I think, like we're okay, like that's and I think the Discord optimization, we can work with Iram and Costa on that. Incorporate comms into the process. It's already happening, but we'll continue to do that. Education on the service, yeah. If people have some advice on that, all of that. Naming the service, yeah, I like the idea of the token log. We're actually going to also put it out to Twitter too. And then the other one that I'd really love to have some help with is engaging the influencers. Like that's in some ways that might be like the most important thing. Is if we don't have that, this won't work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll go ahead and go next and kind of give my thoughts on this. I think education is probably the most important service that we can be providing here in the TEC. I think having education on different aspects of the space in general is something that is going to be our number one service. If we look at the guidelines on how to use and not use the service, how projects, other token engineering projects can utilize the service, making sure that we have the articles written, making sure that we have different areas of education out there to really maximize the use of this curation service, I think would be really, really important. And so I think my focus and my excitement is around the education aspect of it. The other one, I think creating a vehicle to display all the content generated, it would be really nice to have a central place to where, we had these categorizations and, they don't just live in Discord, but they're on like a external site that we can point people to, preferably our own. So those are two really neat ideas that I think are worthy of development. And I'll pass it over to Wonka.
Well, there's this idea that I have, but I don't know if if there's a lot of support on this. But I really think that we should have ambassadors in other communities. I feel like we are doing so many cool stuff, but sometimes it gets only for us. And I think that instead of looking for people to be full time participating inside the Discord, I think having a very liquid mindset would be really cool. And try to onboard people who has already experience in other DAOs, and that way we can also pivot some information of the things that are happening in other DAOs at the right moment, because I've noticed that sometimes we get the information a little bit late, and then we want to participate, and there's other DAOs that are already ahead of us. So I think that we should have a lot of tentacles and have a lot of eyes to be very aware of what's happening everywhere, and that's how then people will come to us as a shelling point and as a common point for all of the projects in the space.
Would you like to pass it?
Sure. I'll pass it to Tam.
Cool, thanks. So I'm going to just say the tiny bit of struggle I have here is because the particular thing that we're working on is really a piece of work that is under a already existing working group, Sampo. And so for me, it feels like this is a great way to give advice process to Sampo, but it doesn't feel so much like it's a piece of work that should be shifted outside. I don't know how to describe that better than, I'm happy to share what I think and some things that I think I would be excited about helping participate in. But I also think that it's important for this particular sprint planning to be something that's more outside of one particular working group for some of the reasons that Gideon mentioned earlier. There's already so much momentum and so much thought that had already gone into it that I just want to be cognizant of not shifting and or slowing down the existing momentum under that working group. Okay, so that said, I'd say, I think feedback for the functionality is something that would be, is really important. And it sounds simple. I mean, it sounds insignificant, but it's actually really not, because, spending time using it and then providing thoughtful feedback to, the team that's running this or that's initiating this, I think is really important. So I'd say that that's something that I'd be interested in working on and contributing to specifically over the course of the sprint, which I believe is really what we want to focus on as a sort of swarming around the one stream of work. And I'm not going to take any more time, so I will pass to Bear.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah, I actually share that feeling that you have, Tom. But I also appreciate a lot like the feedback, and to be honest, I've been more involved in the project, like in the working group, so I don't have much to say right now. I was just trying to read all the ideas and listen to what you guys have to say. So yeah, I think I'll just skip it and just pass it to Septi.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm also pretty aligned with what Tam was saying. This looks like sample work, and then it's like another thing I was thinking is like, if we have like all those issues there and then people is picking them, which is great, then how those issues are going to be rewarded, like, because like, yeah, we should have, I don't know, it seems like it's on project. We really, if someone is, like doing whatever guidelines on how to use and not use the service, like the person assigned to that should get rewarded. So yeah, I feel like that's not connected somehow. Like I was feeling more like when I was talking at the beginning, it was like more like, okay, we have like all those working groups and then projects that those work, and have like somehow community sense, like anyone can join those calls, so like people can propose what to get done by that working group, and then the working groups, can organize the job. Otherwise, it's like, if we have like a lot of tasks there, we really need to coordinate who's getting paid for what. So we need to keep order. I don't know.
And Livy?
Thank you. Yeah, maybe I'll bring a provocation that I don't feel comfortable with the purpose of the TEC being on education. I think that's the conflict we started to have even in a very like subtle way with the TE Academy. Like the TE Academy's purpose is to provide token engineering education, and the way we can support that, and maybe this tool is like bringing some reason of existence to the TEC as we have now, is to organize all the education. So curate all the pieces, like everything that has been happening in the space, all the materials that the TE Academy has been producing. How can we curate that so when people that are looking for token engineering services and the, any type of guidance arrive to the TEC, they can use the service to find that, and maybe that will like help us establishing relationships too with like, could we curate the work that block science does? Could we curate the work that all of the token engineering projects have been doing? So I think it would be really cool to formalize that partnership template and understand what do we want from partners and what we can give to them, and this being one of the things we can give. Like we can help them curate their materials related to tea.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Livy. So like I said before, this is not the most ideal process for this in terms of your comment, Septi, on alignment and making sure that people are paid, that this is a SAMPO working group, TAM, and perhaps get in, you can speak on to, what work is going to be done by the people that have already committed within your working group, what types of tasks that you think are going to be beneficial, and perhaps maybe you can even put them in bold if you don't mind, just for this one sprint planning process. And if anybody wants to own these issues, we can go ahead and put that within this next sprint swarm. And then we will continue to refine this process. But I do think we're kind of, we're heading in the right direction. There are some issues that we need to work out in terms of how we organize the ideas for this. And then, moving forward, adjust accordingly. But at this point in time, this is where I would say, okay, we're going to, whatever you're comfortable with in terms of contributing towards this sprint planning, this is where I would like to see people say, I want to own this. And so if it's develop a framework for partnerships, that's what I want you to own for this sprint. And to create your own, metrics for success, to create your own methods of accomplishment, and then we'll add it to our sprint board. So in terms of just going through, I'm going to own this one, which is to create a Medium article on for the curation service, and I will just say Nate, and I will add that to the next sprint. So if there's anything that you're comfortable with in terms of ownership over the tangible tasks that can be accomplished within this next sprint, it's something that we can reflect on during the next sprint retrospective as well. So I'll give a couple minutes for that. And yeah.
Hey Nate, can people do so I think the difficulty here. So first of all, let me just step back and say, I understand Tam and Septi what you're saying. Actually, I'm a little bit torn with this process too, and yet it's extremely valuable because I think that going forward, as a commons, we can't really afford to be doing a bunch of disparate things anymore. Like, we can't have this working group doing this and this working group doing that. I mean, of course we will. There will be different work that's going on, but as a whole, we need to be trying to pull together so that when we're connecting with the outside, it feels like a whole, right? And so, in a way, like, I see the curation service as not a SAMPO. It's not a SAMPO thing, right? Like, SAMPO is acting as a catalyst for this to be owned by the community, and at some point, so this process that we're going through right now has some friction in it because SAMPO is really driving this, and we're actually doing all right. We're doing pretty well in terms of driving this process. But what this has been really useful for is, one, exposing you all to what we're doing, kind of getting you to go like, oh yeah, that's going to be important, and also figuring out how the work you're doing might assist with this. So I don't know if there are better ways of doing it. Maybe there are, but like, I feel like there's value in this, and maybe we have to just like fine tune it or something like that. All that said, what I would say is that a lot of this stuff is being owned by folks in SAMPO right now, so they are driving a lot of this stuff, or in comms, actually, a lot of it. So if there's specific things like the Medium article, that's awesome. Like, Nate, that's something you could totally own, and like that wasn't something anybody was thinking about doing at all. So if there are things that you do say like, yeah, I could own that, then just say so. That's great. And then we'll have a conversation like, oh, actually, no, Risha was already working on that, but let's, maybe she can partner with you on that. And then I guess the second thing is, if you would like to be included in the advice process for a particular thing, that's also super valuable.
Yeah, thank you, Gideon. That's really awesome. Yeah, and so if you could just take the time to, if you want to own something, own it. I think in the future iterations of this process, I would really like to see, having a collective, a community-wide initiative like this being owned from the framework of what you're doing in your own working group. So if there's aspects of transparency within this curation service that need to be executed on, this is where the transparency working group and maybe Zepti goes, hey, this is what I can provide in the context of what I'm doing and what I'm working on. And where I have expertise and can actually, contribute towards this community-wide initiative. Same with SoftGov. This is a great opportunity for me to develop a partnership framework with other communities. And so just putting into the context of the individual working groups and having that type of say so, and then you can bring those, if it's a large initiative, you can bring that back to your own prospective working groups and say, hey, this is something that we want to accomplish this sprint within the community-wide group as well as our own individual efforts. Those are just my thoughts around it. But if you'd like to, we're going to spend the next 5 minutes. If you want to own something, please put it in bold, put your name on there. I'll put it in the sprint board. Outside of that, we're going to continue improving on this process and making sure that we have a framework for sprint planning into the future as well. So I really am very sorry if this was a little bit more clunky than you're used to, and we'll keep working on it.
Thanks for
can I just add,
facilitating this, Nate.
yeah, can I just add one thing before we all hop off? I think transformation is change, and change is always a little awkward. And I just want to say, if you could have been in the first few sessions where we went from no coordination in the TEC to sprint planning, this wasn't awkward at all. It takes a few iterations to get it right. And I think directionally, we are in the correct direction to address some of the inefficiencies and scale issues that we had in our previous coordination. So I think that this was actually great. And thank you so much, Nate, for facilitating this call today.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, make sure if you do have something you want to contribute, please do put it in bold, because I will put it in the sprint board. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nate. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thanks, Nate.
Everyone.
Thank you.